In May of 2014, Georgia couple Russell and Shirley Dermond were invited to a party located in their upscale neighborhood on Lake Oconee. When they didn't show up, their friends became a little worried, because it wasn't like the Dermonds to just not give any notice. One of these friends tried calling the couple, but after a few days of no response, she decided to stop by their house to make sure everything was okay. Unfortunately, to say that everything was not okay would be a gross understatement. Inside, their friend was met with one of the most horrifying scenes both she and many local officials had ever witnessed. Lying lifeless on the floor of his garage, Russell Dermond was found dead from what appeared to have been a violent murder. However, two very important things were notably missing: Russell's head and his wife Shirley. This case would quickly turn into one of Georgia's most baffling and prolific murder investigations in recent history, putting even more pressure on police to answer the questions: what happened to the Dermonds and why? In today's video, I'm going to lay out everything that has been uncovered in this truly captivating case, but to do that, we need to start at the beginning. Summer, it's a long-standing Southern tradition for people to gather to watch the Kentucky Derby. At viewing parties, spectators will choose their favorite horse to bet on and root for, adding a layer of excitement to the event as they follow the race. On May 3rd, 2014, a couple named Huell and Peggy Winn were hosting one of these viewing parties in their neighborhood called Great Waters Reynolds. Located in the city of Eatonton in Putnam County, Great Waters is a luxury gated community with a golf course, security, and waterfront homes on Lake Oconee. The crime rate is close to zero, making it a beautiful and safe place to live. And two close friends of Huell and Peggy Winn were Russell and Shirley Dermond, who had been excited to attend the yearly Kentucky Derby party. You truly couldn't find a single person with a bad thing to say about the Dermonds. Both growing up in New Jersey, after graduating from college, Shirley met Russell, who had just gotten back from serving in the Navy during World War II. They got married in 1951, and Russell went on to work as an executive for a clock company. The couple ended up having 4 children, 3 sons named Mark, Keith, and Brad, and a daughter named Leslie. In the late 1980s, Russell's was transferred to Roswell, Georgia, but decided to leave the company to franchise several Hardee's restaurants around the Atlanta area. The Dermonds were a very religious family, and Russell has been referred to as a loving disciplinarian. However, regardless of how strict and loving two parents are, sometimes their children end up going down the wrong path, which is exactly what happened with Shirley and Russell's son, Mark. In the year 2000, tragedy struck the Dermond family after Mark, who had been struggling with an addiction, was killed during a cocaine deal gone bad. His killer was put in prison, but this was a devastating blow to their tight-knit family, who had otherwise lived a happy and peaceful life. Through their loss, the rest of the family stayed close, and Russell bonded with Keith and Brad by teaching them about business, and they even took over the restaurant franchises when he decided to retire. The men of the family were avid golfers as well, so when Russell and Shirley found land available in Great Waters Reynolds, they knew the neighborhood with the beautiful golf course would be a great place to live out their golden years. On an acre of land surrounded by dense trees, Russell and Shirley built a 3,000 square foot home overlooking Lake Oconee. Shirley would read and do crossword puzzles by the lake, played bridge with other ladies in the community, and after golf became too strenuous, Russell still loved strolling their beautiful neighborhood. Their 9 grandchildren would come to visit them every summer to attend camp at the lake, and over the years the Dermonds made great friends and memories in their little slice of heaven. By 2014, Russell was 88 and Shirley was 87. But the two were still getting out and socializing on a regular basis. Now, I mentioned earlier that they had been excited to go over to Huell and Peggy Winn's house for the Kentucky Derby, which was taking place on Saturday, May 3rd. Just before 6:30 that evening, a beautiful chestnut stallion named California Chrome won the race in Louisville. And while everyone was cheering and having a great time, Peggy couldn't help but notice that Russell and Shirley were absent. She tried calling them several times over the next 3 days, but when she got no response, on May 6th, she decided to go check on them at their house. Even though they lived less than a mile down the road, Peggy asked her husband Huell to come along. She wasn't expecting anything too serious, but with elderly friends, a fall or some other type of medical incident isn't out of the realm of possibility. However, as we know, what they found was much worse. With no answer at the front door, the Winns decided to go around the house. That's when they saw the first sign that something might be wrong. The Dermonds' back door was left wide open. When Huell and Peggy walked inside, they called out for Shirley and Russell, but got no answer. At first glance, Nothing remarkable stood out. Shirley kept an extremely tidy home, and everything seemed to be in place. In the master bedroom, the bed was still unmade, and on the kitchen table was a partially completed newspaper crossword puzzle. If the couple had gone out of town, Shirley is definitely the kind of person who would have made the bed first. The Winns headed into the garage, which is where they discovered the unthinkable. Between the couple's 2 parked cars, they found Russell's headless and therefore lifeless body. In horror, Peggy immediately called 911.
Putnam County 911.
Yes, I have an emergency.
Okay.
I think I have somebody dead.
Okay, what's the address, ma'am?
Huel, what's the address here?
I don't know.
We're in Great Waters.
Is it 147 Carolyn Drive?
Yes, 147 Carolyn Drive.
Okay, and who is it?
The Dermonds.
Okay, and you're a neighbor or something?
Yes, I just came to check on them. They've been missing for about 4 days.
Are they in the house?
Yes.
And what's your name, ma'am?
I'm Peggy Winn.
Okay.
Oh, my God. Oh.
Okay. They're both dead, Miss Winn?
Did you find both of them? No.
Okay.
No, it's just one.
Okay.
I don't know where the other one is.
Okay. All right, I'll get you a deputy in the ambulance over there just in case, okay?
Yes, please.
Okay.
Please.
All right.
Thank you so much.
Okay, bye-bye.
Bye-bye.
Along with first responders, the Putnam County Sheriff, Howard Seals, arrived on the scene to immediately begin the investigation. Even though Russell was clearly dead, Shirley was nowhere to be found, and time was of the essence. Had she been abducted? Was she somehow involved? Time would only tell.
First up tonight, the Putnam County Sheriff's Office is trying to find a missing woman whose husband was found murdered this morning. They're trying to locate 87-year-old Shirley Dermond. They believe that she might be the victim of a kidnapping. Investigators were called to the Great Waters community on Lake Oconee in Putnam County this morning. They were called after friends went in to check on the Dermonds and found 88-year-old Russell Dermond dead.
Now, if you've listened to the video I did covering the cult that came to Putnam County in the 90s, you would have already heard a little bit about Sheriff Seals. If not, that's a really interesting story as well, but it's just a coincidence that the same sheriff was the lead investigator in both cases. Howard Seals is the epitome of a no-nonsense Southern sheriff. He's been in law enforcement for almost 50 years and trained with the FBI Academy, so he's definitely the kind of guy you want working on a case like this. The first thing investigators noticed upon entering the garage was that Russell Dermond was lying face up in a pool of dried blood. His body was already in a state of mild decomposition, and he was wearing only his boxers and a short-sleeved shirt with his bathrobe underneath his body. Off to the side, they discovered Russell's house slippers and blood on the bottom of his feet. There was a trail of blood going from the back door to where his body was on the floor, and it appeared that whoever did this placed towels around his body and near the door to keep blood from seeping outside of the house. Sheriff Seals noticed a round bloodstain on the floor, and a lamp that looked like it had been brought to the garage from inside the home was sitting on one of the vehicles as well. Officers cleared the home, searching in every room, every closet, under the beds, everywhere they could think of, but there was no sign of Shirley or the killer. In fact, other than the grisly scene in the garage, there was very little sign of anything at all. The back door was open, but there was no evidence of forced entry. The house didn't appear to be ransacked in any way, and all of the Dermonds' personal belongings, including items of value, were still there. So clearly this wasn't a robbery because not even a credit card was taken. So what was the motive? The next agonizing task Sheriff Seals had to deal with was contacting Russell and Shirley's children. To say they were devastated doesn't even begin to cover it. And all three were living out of state at the time and had to make their way to their parents' house after receiving the unthinkable news. When they arrived, investigators had already removed Russell's body to take to the medical examiner's office. But the remnants on the floor of the garage painted a picture of just how brutal their father's death had been. This only made them even more desperate to find out what happened to Shirley. The sheriff's office put photos of Shirley on hundreds of electronic billboards across the state of Georgia, and news channels gave her description: 5 feet 2 inches tall, 148 pounds, gray hair and blue eyes. The couple's cars were in the garage. All of their money, cards, and phones were at home. She couldn't have made it that far on foot at her age, and hopefully someone, somewhere knew something. Police began a massive search on foot by air, and utilizing cadaver dogs in the surrounding area. Another main detail is the fact that the Dermonds lived on the lake, and even though they didn't own a boat, every house on Lake Oconee had a dock. Lake Oconee has been described as a water highway, with residents and visitor boats constantly going in and out for fishing and other recreational activities. It's highly possible that someone came from the water, which opened up an entirely new angle of possibilities. Using remote operated vehicles, sonar, and even divers, officials scoured the lake, but with so much debris in the water, nothing was found in the immediate area. At the medical examiner's office, it was noted that Russell's head had been removed with a relatively clean cut. It wasn't surgical precision by any means, but it definitely didn't have any haphazard sawing either. However, another discovery made it obvious that this injury had more than likely not been the cause of Russell's death. Gunpowder residue was revealed on the collar of his shirt, meaning that whoever cut off his head probably did so to conceal evidence left by a gunshot. His hands were also reportedly bruised and bloody, and there was a deep cut going from one of his fingers down to his palm. Around his bloodied hand were also strands of Shirley's hair, meaning he possibly tried to defend her and himself from their attacker. The next thing the investigators needed to do was try to pin down a timeline, any last known sightings, and of course, any potential suspects. This would be easier said than done, considering a motive was still unclear. If Shirley was abducted in hopes of gathering a ransom, surely the perpetrator would have left a note. However, whoever did this seemingly left nothing at the home, including anything that could tie themselves to the crime. While there were some unofficial sightings of Shirley and Russell in the community, the last confirmed sighting occurred on Thursday, May 1st. Russell went into town and was seen on bank surveillance making a deposit in the drive-thru at the Lake Oconee People's Bank at 2:15 p.m. He then went to the local Publix and was seen on camera picking up a prescription for Shirley, and then purchasing a loaf of bread and some produce. The clothes he was wearing in the footage were found in the laundry at the Dermond's residence during the search. Later that evening, Russell spoke on the phone to his son, Brad, and it had been just a normal conversation, catching up and talking about their day. The crossword that was half completed on the kitchen had been from Friday's newspaper, but Saturday's edition was still in the driveway. This indicated that whatever transpired had to have occurred between late Friday morning to Saturday morning, but there was still no way to know for sure. Since this crime happened back in 2014, it wasn't as common for every house to have surveillance or a Ring doorbell. Neither the Dermonds or anyone surrounding them had any cameras, and the only potentially suspicious activity was a neighbor reporting that he thinks he saw someone in their yard on Saturday. Investigators knew that the security station in front of the gate community had surveillance cameras, but unfortunately, due to a storm that had recently taken place, the cameras weren't functioning at the time. Guards at the security station were required to stop anyone entering the neighborhood to confirm where they were going. The only exception to this rule was worker vehicles, like lawn services, electrical companies, and so on. So it is technically possible that the perpetrator came in masked as some sort of business. However, a murderer entering in this way would still be extremely risky, as no one knew that the surveillance cameras weren't working. Plus, another piece of evidence only strengthened Sheriff Seals' theory that the killer came on the water. In the Dermond's backyard, there was a sidewalk that went from the house down to the dock. Seals noted a scrape going all the way down the sidewalk that appeared to be fresh and looked like it could have been made by something like a wheelbarrow. In his opinion, the Dermonds wouldn't have been doing any hard labor that would require a heavy enough tool to leave such a mark. Could the killer have used a wheelbarrow or potentially dragged something from the house down to the dock? And could that something have been a someone, perhaps Shirley Dermond? Over the next week, members of law enforcement questioned anyone who had potential ties to the couple. They ran background checks on hundreds of people who lived in the community. They conducted polygraph tests on their immediate friends and family, but they were still left without any leads. As the days went by, hope for Shirley being found alive began to fade, and unfortunately, 10 days after the start of the investigation, all of their worst fears became a reality. 5 miles from the Dermond home, two men fishing in the middle of Lake Oconee made a horrifying discovery, almost as gruesome as the first.
Putnam County 911.
Yes, ma'am. We just come out, left our house to go fishing near Long Shoals boat ramp, and we went down towards the dam, Rock Island, and that way we can't get close enough to it, and I don't want to get close enough to it, but it appears like a body floating in the water against a tree over here.
They saw something ominous just below the water's surface, stuck on some debris. When the police came to investigate, they found the body of Shirley Dermond. As horrible as it sounds, a body that has been in the water for any significant amount of time is a tragic and ghastly sight, and Shirley's body was said to have bloated to over double its natural size. Tied to her ankles were 2 concrete blocks weighing 30 pounds each, indicating that whoever put her there intended for her to never be found. During Shirley's autopsy, the medical examiner noted that heavy-duty paracord had been tightly wrapped around each ankle 5 times. The cord was attached to a mesh bag containing the cinder blocks. Shirley was completely clothed, and the examination did not indicate evidence of sexual assault. However, it was apparent that she had undergone severe blunt force trauma. She had been struck multiple times in the head by an object with a flat end, such as a hammer, but the assault had been so severe that it penetrated her skull. Even though investigators did an in-depth search of the area where Shirley was recovered, they were still unable to locate Russell's head. Currently in 2024, the investigation into the murders of Russell and Shirley Dermond is ongoing. While it appeared that the case had gone cold over the last 10 years, there have recently been new developments that I will discuss shortly. However, before I do that, I want to talk about what Sheriff Seals believes happened in this case, and go over some of the potential suspects and motive theories. From Seals' perspective, based on the lack of obvious forced entry, he believes that either the Dermonds knew their attacker, that the person had a supposed reason to be there, like someone posing it as a worker, or that they were snuck up on. According to their son Brad, they weren't very stringent about security. If one of their doors were unlocked, someone could have come in and caught them off guard while they were just getting their day started. Even though it's theoretically possible that one person entered the home, it's likely there was more than one person involved in this attack. Containing 2 people, even though they were elderly, and moving bodies around would be easier with more than one person. Seals also believes this attack was premeditated. There were no murder weapons like knives or hammers obviously taken from the Dermond residence, and even though Russell did own guns, none of his were missing. The perpetrator or perpetrators must have brought their own weapons, and it's likely they used these to threaten the couple. A mess would have indicated a violent struggle, but since the inside of the house was virtually untouched, they were probably kept calm with the threat of a weapon. It was only when Russell realized how dire the situation was that he decided to fight back and defend Shirley, which is likely how he sustained the injury to his hand, only to be overcome. Also, people that attack on a whim don't usually carry around paracord and concrete blocks to weigh down bodies in a lake. Seals believe that the lack of blood splatter indicates that Shirley was not killed inside the home. If they had taken her on the boat while she was alive, shooting her in the lake would have made a loud echoing noise and called too much attention, which is likely why she was bludgeoned to death instead. While it's not exactly known where Russell was killed, his autopsy revealed that his head was definitely removed post-mortem. Seals believe that even if the attackers knew where they were going, they might not have been familiar with the inside of the home. He had said that during their investigation, they had a hard time locating the light switch inside the garage. The attackers probably had a hard time finding it as well, which is why they brought a lamp from inside the house out to the garage to illuminate the room while they performed the decapitation. The round bloodstain on the floor is likely where they set his severed head before loading it up into their boat or vehicle. Why leave Russell's body but take Shirley's? Well, Seals believe this could have been to send a message. A message to who is still unclear, but if they really wanted to get rid of all the evidence, they could have easily just taken Russell with them and disposed of him the same way they did Shirley. Going forward, Sheriff Seals and the rest of the investigators felt like the only way to solve this case would be to figure out what the motive was. The brutality of Russell and Shirley's murders indicate that this was a highly personal attack, but everyone who knew the couple has been adamant that they had no enemies.
Obviously, mom and dad at that point were mid to late 80s. If there was an enemy out there, it would have taken place, a lot sooner than that.
Brad Dermond is the victim's son. He says their murders make no sense, as the couple had no known enemies.
Items of value that were left in the house, nothing was taken, that kind of thing.
There have been some theories online ranging from the mundane to the pretty outrageous. One of the more common theories is that 2 amateur robbers targeted the Dermonds for their wealth. Even though the Dermonds did have money, they weren't flashy people by any means, and not as filthy rich as some of the other people in their community. However, their house was located in an opportune area of the neighborhood, set back from the road and heavily concealed by trees. Even though the perpetrators didn't take anything of high value from the home, maybe they took Shirley along with them in hopes of having her withdraw money, only to find out that you can't withdraw a large lump sum from the bank on a Saturday, especially if you don't even have your ID or debit card with you. It was thought that maybe an old disgruntled employee could have had a vendetta against Russell, but many were interviewed and it appeared to be a dead end. When investigators found out about Shirley and Russell's son, Mark, they tried to figure out if his murder could somehow be related. However, Mark's murderer is still in prison, and Brad Dermond has said that when all of this was going on, None of the family had been in much contact with him. Mark didn't want to accept any of their help, and they had become estranged, so none of the family was involved or even attended the trial. Another theory is that Mark had gotten wrapped up with some unsavory people who wanted to take revenge against his family. But Seals had made it clear that it's not like Mark was a prolific drug kingpin. He was an addict, and it's highly unlikely anyone who owed a debt would be seeking retribution 14 years later. In regards to the rest of the family, many people have wondered whether one or more of their children could have been involved in a murder-for-hire scheme against their parents. Life insurance policies and inheritance always come as a potential motive in cases like this. However, Shirley and Russell were both each other's executor of state and beneficiaries. If the children were doing this for money, they would have wanted Shirley to be found and pronounced dead, not a missing person. Whoever did this clearly didn't want Shirley to be found. Plus, all of the children pass polygraph tests. While it is possible to manipulate the results of a polygraph, I just personally don't see the children being involved. But you'll have to let me know what you think. One of the stranger speculations has to do with the fact that Russell served in World War II. There have been wild claims of potential war crime retribution to the Dermonds being involved in organized crime with the mafia back in New Jersey. Seals has been adamant that both of these claims are unfounded and ridiculous, and I think I have to agree with him on these ones. To be clear, there's some pretty deep rabbit holes that we could go down concerning the potential theories of this case, and if you're interested, I could definitely make a separate video. However, to keep this succinct, I'm going to go ahead and discuss some of the recent updates on the case. Earlier, I mentioned that the perpetrators were clearly very careful not to leave behind any evidence that could trace them to their crime. However, it turns out that they may have not been careful enough. As of summer 2024, there is reportedly new DNA evidence currently being tested as a potential break in the case. During the initial investigation, hundreds, if not thousands of fingerprints and swabs were taken throughout the home. A laboratory recently confirmed that DNA belonging to someone unknown to the case was found to be mixed with Russell's DNA located at the crime scene. This lab is hoping that the sample will be enough and high enough quality to run DNA databases, as well as to do genealogical testing. Even if the suspects aren't located in the databases, it's possible that the DNA could be linked to a family member of the suspect, which in recent times has been vital in solving even the coldest of cases. In addition, new technology that was previously unavailable in 2014 is now being used on raw cellular data. The FBI is working to analyze this data in hopes that the perpetrator's phone pinged in the area during the time frame of the murders. An FBI special agent also mentioned that they do have other new leads that they are keeping close to their vest.
Whether it's the DNA evidence that we're evaluating or cellular data that we're evaluating.
S.A. Smith makes it clear.
We never stop trying to find who committed this murder.
The most promising lead in nearly a decade. DNA found on Russell's shirt. A private lab confirms does not belong to the Dermonds, which Putnam County Sheriff Howard Sills just learned about last week.
It's probably going to be whoever perpetrated these murders, or at least somebody who was a party to the crime.
A crime with many unanswered questions only investigators and the Dermonds' killers can answer.
We're not ready to put out all the details that we have about what happened that night.
But a decade later, they're ready to put the killers on notice.
We do have leads that we are looking for you, and that we're not going to stop until we get you.
Finally, after all these years, it seems this case is finally getting somewhere. The Dermond murders were a devastating and senseless act of violence, and the unanswered questions have haunted their loved ones in the community for years. Shirley's autopsy report notes that she previously had a double mastectomy, meaning at some point in her life, she probably battled breast cancer. Russell served our country by fighting in World War II. It's hard to accept that after overcoming so much during their long lives, that they were taken out in such a brutal way. Over his nearly 50-year career, Sheriff Howard Sills has never not solved a case. And I have a feeling that with the help of new technology, Shirley and Russell's killers will be brought to justice soon.
Every anniversary since the first one has troubled me, and I woke up this morning like I wake up every morning for the last 5 years, and I truly, it's the first thing I think about when I get up in the morning. I still think it was some sort of extortion, robbery of some sort, that the Dermonds didn't have access to something somebody wanted. I still believe there's more than one perpetrator involved, but most importantly, I still believe somebody knows about this and they need to tell us. And I mean, whoever did this is still out there, and whoever did this will do anything, or they are a true psychopath that leads a different life.
The reward for information leading to an arrest and conviction in this case has increased to $25,000. If you or anyone you know have any tips, you can contact the Putnam County Sheriff's Office directly at 706-485-8557 or the FBI's Atlanta Field Office at 770-216-3000. This has been Joshua John with Behind the Headlines. Until next time, stay safe.